The kitchen stone was cold against Sarai's bare knees. She scrubbed the grease-stained floor in small, methodical circles, her hands raw and red from the lye soap. Around her, the palace kitchen roared with life. Cooks shouted orders. Fires crackled. Pots clanged against metal counters, but she existed in silence, not the peaceful kind, the suffocating kind. The mute girl, they called her, the broken one. She had arrived 8 years ago with nothing but the tattered dress on her back and eyes that had seen too much. The border raids had taken everything. Her family, her pack, her voice. Beta Isaac Mills had found her wandering the burnt remains of her village, 13 years old and unable to speak. He'd brought her to the capital, to Alpha King Marmon Richmond's palace, where she'd been given a servant's uniform and a corner in the basement to sleep. No one asked questions. No one cared. Sarai preferred it that way. She finished the floor and rose silently, gathering her bucket. The evening meal had been served, which meant the council had finished their meeting. There would be broken furniture to mend, wine stains to remove, and blood to clean. Alpha Wyatt Mills had been particularly aggressive lately, challenging the king's decisions about the Eastern Territories. Last week, he'd thrown a chair through a window. As she moved through the servants' corridor toward the council chambers, footsteps echoed behind her. Heavy, measured, authoritative. Her heart seized. Alpha King Marmon Richmond. Sarai pressed herself against the wall, head down, making herself small, invisible. It was a skill she'd perfected over 8 years, disappearing in plain sight. But tonight, something was different. The footsteps stopped. She could feel his presence like heat radiating from a fire. The bond she'd buried deep in her chest, the one she'd felt the first day Isaac brought her here, stirred. It stretched awake after years of forced hibernation, reaching toward him like a flower toward sunlight. No. You work late. His voice was deep, rough from hours of arguing with stubborn council members. Sarai had heard him speak 1,000 times, commanding troops, passing judgments, addressing crowds, but never to her, never directly. She nodded once, keeping her eyes fixed on the floor. Silence stretched between them. She counted her heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. Then she heard it, a sharp intake of breath, the kind someone makes when recognition hits them like a physical blow. His wolf had sensed something. Sarai's hands trembled around the bucket handle. Please don't recognize me. Please. Have you always worked here? Marmon asked quietly. She nodded again, throat burning with all the words she could never say. More silence. His boots shifted on the marble floor. What's your name? She couldn't answer, wouldn't answer. Speaking meant questions, questions meant discovery, discovery meant death. The head servant, Gundred Brock, had made that perfectly clear 8 years ago. Girls who cause trouble don't last long here. Keep your head down, do your work, and maybe you'll survive. Sarai had taken those words to heart. I see, Marmon said, and there was something in his tone. Confusion, frustration, curiosity. She didn't dare look up to find out. Get some rest, he finally said, his voice softer. The palace will still need cleaning tomorrow. He walked away, his footsteps fatting down the corridor. Sarai stayed frozen until she heard the distant sound of his chamber door closing. Only then did she release the breath she'd been holding. Her reflection stared back at her from the pink-tinted water in her bucket. Hollow eyes, tangled brown hair, a face that had forgotten how to hope. If I speak, they'll kill me. If I stay silent, I'll lose him forever. But she'd made her choice 8 years ago, and she'd lived with the consequences every single day since. The basement stairs creaked as she descended into the servants' quarters. The smell of damp stone and unwashed bodies filled the narrow hallway. Her corner was exactly as she'd left it. A thin mattress, a single blanket, a wooden crate that held her few possessions. She set down her bucket and sank onto the mattress, her knees aching from hours of scrubbing. Across the room, Lee Finch was mending a torn apron by candlelight. She looked up and offered a small smile. Lee was one of the few who showed Sarai any kindness, not pity, just quiet acknowledgement that they both existed in this forgotten place. Sarai returned the smile briefly, before lying down. Sleep didn't come easily. It never did. But eventually, exhaustion pulled her under, and she dreamed of fire and screaming and a voice she could no longer use. Morning came too soon. The bells rang at dawn, calling servants to their duties. Sarai rose and dressed in the same gray uniform she wore every day. She tied her hair back with a frayed ribbon and made her way upstairs to the kitchens. The head cook, Maybelle Cross, was already barking orders when Sarai arrived. "You, mute girl, we need more firewood from the storehouse. Move." Sarai hurried to obey. The storehouse sat at the far edge of the palace grounds, a long stone building that smelled of cedar and smoke. She gathered an armful of logs and turned to leave when voices caught her attention. Two men stood just outside the storehouse door. She recognized them immediately. Alpha Wyatt Mills and Guard Captain Clyde Voss. "The king is getting soft," Wyatt was saying. "He refuses to expand into the eastern territories, refuses to strengthen our borders. At this rate, we'll be vulnerable to every pack within 100 miles. "What do you suggest?" Clyde asked. "I suggest we remind him that strength is what keeps a kingdom safe, not compassion, not mercy." Sarai's blood ran cold. She pressed herself against the wall, praying they wouldn't notice her. "And if he still refuses?" Clyde pressed. Wyatt's laugh was dark. "Then perhaps it's time for new leadership." Sarai's heart pounded so loud she was certain they could hear it. But the men moved away, their conversation fatting into the morning air. She waited until she was sure they were gone before hurrying back to the kitchen. Her hands shook as she stacked the firewood near the ovens. They're planning something dangerous. But who could she tell? She had no voice, no allies. No one would believe a mute servant girl even if she found a way to communicate what she'd heard. The day passed in a blur of work, scrubbing, sweeping, carrying. By evening, her body ached, but her mind raced with worry. She was heading back to the servants' quarters when she saw him again. Marmon stood in the corridor outside the library, studying a portrait on the wall. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and he'd removed his formal jacket, leaving him in just a white shirt and dark trousers. He looked tired, human. Sarai tried to slip past unnoticed, but his voice stopped her. "Wait." She froze, her heart hammering. He turned to face her. "You're the girl from last night, the one who works late." She nodded, keeping her eyes down. "Do you have a moment?" Her mind screamed at her to leave, to run, to disappear, but her body wouldn't move. Marmon gestured toward the library. "I could use some company, even if it's silent company." It wasn't a request. It was a command, though his tone was gentle. Sarai followed him into the library, her pulse racing. The room was massive, lined floor to ceiling with books. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, casting warm light across the leather furniture. Marmon settled into a chair near the fire and gestured for her to sit. She perched on the edge of a nearby chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I don't even know your name," he said quietly. 8 years you've worked here, and I never noticed you until last night. That's shameful of me." Sarai's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him it wasn't his fault, that she'd worked hard to be invisible, but the words stayed locked inside. "Can you write?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. He pulled a piece of paper and a pencil from the desk and handed them to her. "Will you tell me your name?" Her hand trembled as she wrote, "Sarai." "Sarai," he repeated, and something about the way he said it made her chest ache. "That's a beautiful name." She didn't know what to do with that, so she simply sat there, the paper clutched in her hands. "You don't speak at all?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Can't or won't." She stared at the paper, unsure how to answer. Finally, she wrote, "Both." Marmon studied her for a long moment. "Someone hurt you." It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. His jaw tightened. "If you're in danger, I can protect you, but you have to trust me." Trust, the word felt foreign. She'd survived 8 years by trusting no one. But sitting here, in the firelight, with the Alpha King looking at her like she mattered, something inside her wanted to believe him. She wrote slowly. "Some secrets are too dangerous to tell." Marmon read the words and his expression softened. "Then I'll wait, until you're ready." The kindness in his voice nearly broke her. He stood and walked to the window, staring out at the moonlit gardens. "This kingdom is full of secrets, everyone hiding something, everyone afraid." He glanced back at her. "I'm tired of it. I want honesty, truth, even if it's difficult. Sarai wanted to tell him that truth could kill, that honesty was a luxury people like her couldn't afford, but she stayed silent. "Thank you for the company, Sarai," he said finally. "You can go, but if you ever need anything at all, you come to me. Do you understand?" She nodded and stood, leaving the paper on the chair. As she walked back to the servants' quarters, she felt the mate bond pulling tighter. Every step away from him hurt. Her wolf whimpered inside her chest, crying out for the mate she could never claim. But claiming him meant revealing who she was, and that meant death. So she descended into the darkness of the basement and buried the pain deep where it couldn't reach her. Or so she told herself. Sarai couldn't sleep. The conversation with Marmon played over and over in her mind. His kindness, his offer of protection, the way he'd said her name. She rose from her mattress and lit a small candle. The flame cast dancing shadows on the stone walls. Some secrets are too dangerous to tell. But maybe it was time to remember why she kept those secrets, to remember what she'd lost. She closed her eyes and let the memories come. 8 years ago, she'd been a different person. Sarai Lambert, daughter of Alpha Derman Lambert and Luna Kathleen Lambert. Their pack had controlled the Northern Territories, a prosperous region known for its fertile land and strong alliances. She'd been 13 years old, happy, loved, safe. The attack came at midnight. Sarai had been asleep in her room when the screaming started. She'd bolted upright, her young wolf senses immediately alert to danger. Smoke filled the hallway outside her door, the smell of burning wood and something worse, burning flesh. She'd run toward her parents' chambers, but a hand grabbed her from behind, yanking her back. "Sarai, no. It was Emmett Bonner, one of her father's guards. You have to hide." "My parents are fighting. Your father ordered me to protect you. Come." He dragged her toward the servants' staircase, but they only made it halfway before the ceiling collapsed. Emmett shoved her through a doorway into a storage room just as the burning beam fell. It crushed him. Sarai screamed, but the sound was lost in the chaos. She crawled deeper into the storage room, into a cellar she didn't know existed. She huddled there in the darkness, listening to her world die above her. The screaming went on for hours. Her mother's voice calling for her father's roar of defiance, the victorious howls of the attacking wolves. Then silence. Terrible, complete silence. Sarai stayed in that cellar for 3 days, too terrified to move, too traumatized to cry. She survived on rainwater that dripped through cracks in the ceiling and the desperate hope that someone would come. When Beta Isaac Mills finally found her, she was barely conscious. He'd been leading a rescue mission, searching for survivors. He found 7. Sarai was one of them. But when he tried to get her to speak, to tell him her name, no sound came out. The trauma had stolen her voice. They loaded the survivors onto a wagon and began the long journey to the capital. On the 3rd day, Isaac pulled Sarai aside during a rest stop. "I know who you are," he'd said quietly. "You're Derman's daughter." Sarai's eyes had widened in fear. "It's all right. I served under your father years ago before I transferred to the capital." Isaac glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "But you need to understand something. Your family had enemies, powerful enemies. I don't know who orchestrated this attack, but they wanted the Lambert line eliminated." Sarai had wanted to scream, to demand justice, to rage against the unfairness of it all, but she couldn't speak. "I'm going to take you somewhere safe," Isaac continued. "To Alpha King Marmon's palace, but you can't tell anyone who you really are, not until we know who to trust. Do you understand?" She'd nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll protect you as best I can," Isaac promised. "But you have to stay invisible. Can you do that?" Another nod. When they arrived at the palace, Sarai was separated from the other survivors. Isaac had arranged for her to be assigned to the kitchen staff, far from the political machinations of the court. But then Gundred Brock had taken her aside on that first day. The head servant's eyes had been cold and calculating. "You're the Lambert girl." Sarai's blood had frozen. "Don't look so surprised. I make it my business to know everything that happens in this palace." Gundred stepped closer. "Your family had enemies, child, powerful ones. If anyone discovers who you really are, you won't survive the week. Do you understand?" Sarai had nodded, trembling. Good, you'll work in the kitchens. You'll keep your head down. You'll cause no trouble. Gundred's smile was cruel. And you'll never speak about where you came from. In fact, it would be better if you didn't speak at all. A mute servant draws less attention than a frightened child with secrets. That night, alone in the basement, Sarai had made her vow of silence. If speaking meant death, she would never speak again. But there was something Gundred and Isaac didn't know. Something Sarai had felt the very first day she arrived at the palace. She'd been carrying her cleaning supplies across the main courtyard when she'd seen him. Alpha King Marmon Richmond, barely 19 years old, newly crowned after his father's death in battle. He'd been training with his guards, shirtless and covered in sweat, and when their eyes met across the courtyard, Sarai had felt it. The mate bond. Sharp and undeniable, like a thread of gold connecting her heart to his. Her wolf had recognized him instantly. Mate, mine. But she was 13, voiceless, hunted, and he was the king. So she'd buried that bond deep in her chest and forbidden herself from ever acknowledging it. 8 years had passed since that day. 8 years of watching him from the shadows. 8 years of feeling the bond grow stronger while forcing herself to ignore it. Until last night, when he'd spoken to her directly for the first time. Until tonight, when he'd asked for her company and looked at her like she mattered. The mate bond was waking up, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Sarai opened her eyes, the candle burning low beside her. The memories left her feeling hollow and exhausted. If I reveal who I am, the people who killed my family will finish the job. If I stay silent, I lose any chance of being with my mate. There was no good choice, only survival. She blew out the candle and lay back down, pulling the thin blanket over her shoulders. Tomorrow she would wake up and scrub floors. She would be invisible. She would be safe. And she would keep breaking her own heart, one silent day at a time. 3 days passed. 3 days of Sarai trying to avoid Marmon while simultaneously craving every glimpse of him. It was torture. She scrubbed floors in corridors he'd just walked through, breathing in the faint scent of pine and winter air that clung to the space. She cleaned the council chambers after meetings, touching the chair where he sat, feeling the lingering warmth of his presence. The mate bond was no longer dormant. It pulsed constantly now, a living thing inside her chest that pulled her toward him like the tide to the moon. She was in the kitchens on the 4th morning, when Lee Finch approached her with a knowing look. "The king has been asking about you," Lee whispered. Sarai's hands froze in the dishwater. "Don't look so frightened. He asked Maybelle who the quiet girl was, the one who works late," Lee smiled. "She told him your name, Sarai." Heat flooded Sarai's cheeks. He was asking about her, thinking about her. "Be careful," Lee added, her expression turning serious. "Gundred has been watching you more closely lately. I think she knows something's changed." Sarai nodded her understanding. Gundred missed nothing. The day wore on with the usual tasks, but as evening approached, Sarai was summoned to Gundred's office, a cramped room near the kitchens that smelled of old parchment and suspicion. Gundred sat behind her desk, her thin lips pressed into a hard line. "Sit," she ordered. Sarai obeyed, her heart pounding. "The king has taken an interest in you." Gundred's eyes were sharp. "Why?" Sarai shook her head, trying to convey confusion. "Don't play games with me, girl. I know you understand every word I say." Gundred leaned forward. "You've worked here for 8 years without causing a single problem. Don't start now." Sarai wanted to scream that she hadn't done anything wrong, but she kept her expression neutral. "If the king asks to see you again, you will decline. Find an excuse. Get someone else to take your place. Do you understand?" Sarai hesitated. How could she decline a direct order from the Alpha King? "Do you understand?" Gundred repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. Sarai nodded slowly. "Good, you're dismissed." Sarai fled the office, her mind racing. Gundred was afraid of something, afraid of Marmon discovering Sarai. But why? What did it matter to Gundred if the king noticed a servant? Unless Gundred knew more than she'd let on. Unless she knew exactly who Sarai was and why she needed to stay hidden. The thought chilled her. That evening, as Sarai carried fresh linens to the guest chambers, she passed the royal library. The door was open, and she could see Marmon inside, seated at a desk covered in maps and documents. He looked up as she passed. Their eyes met. Sarai. She stopped, torn between Gundred's warning and the pull of the mate bond. Come in for a moment, Marmon said. Please. It wasn't a command this time. It was a request. Sarai glanced down the corridor. Empty. She stepped into the library, clutching the linens like a shield. Marmon stood and approached her. He stopped a respectful distance away, but she could still feel the heat of his presence. I've been thinking about what you wrote, he said, about secrets being too dangerous to tell. She waited, barely breathing. I want you to know that whatever you're afraid of, whatever danger you're running from, you're safe here, with me. His gray eyes held hers. I don't know why, but I feel protective of you, like I need to keep you safe. The mate bond. He was feeling it too, even if he didn't fully understand what it was. Will you let me help you? He asked softly. Sarai's hands trembled. She wanted to say yes, wanted to trust him. But Gundred's warning echoed in her mind, and beneath that, the memory of her family's screams. She shook her head slowly. Disappointment flickered across Marmon's face. All right, I won't push, but the offer stands. She nodded and turned to leave. Sarah. She paused in the doorway. You're not invisible to me, he said. I want you to know that. The words hit her like a physical blow. Tears stung her eyes as she hurried away, the linens forgotten in her arms. She wasn't invisible to him. After 8 years of trying so hard to disappear, her mate saw her. And that terrified her more than anything. Sarai made it to the guest chambers and deposited the linens with shaking hands. She needed to be alone, needed to think. She took a shortcut through the servants' passages, heading for the basement. But as she rounded a corner, she nearly collided with Sarah Hobbs. Sarah was one of the older servants, a kind woman in her 40s who'd worked at the palace for 20 years. Oh, Sarai, dear, I'm sorry I didn't see you. Sarah smiled, then frowned. Are you all right? You look upset. Sarai nodded quickly, trying to move past. But Sarah gently caught her arm. Wait, can I ask you something? Sarai hesitated, then nodded. Sarah glanced around to make sure they were alone. This morning, I saw you organizing the library shelves. You were reading the spines, the ones in Latin. Sarai's stomach dropped. Only someone with noble education would know Latin, Sarah continued quietly. Who are you really? Panic surged through Sarai. She shook her head frantically, pulling away. It's all right, I'm not going to tell anyone. Sarah's voice was urgent and kind. I just want you to know that you have friends here. Lee and I, we've noticed things. The way you carry yourself sometimes. The way you understand complex orders without explanation. You're not just a servant, are you? Sarai's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to deny it to lie, but Sarah's kindness undid her. She shook her head slowly. No, I'm not just a servant. I thought so. Sarah squeezed her hand. Your secret is safe with me, with us. But Sarai, if you're in danger, you need to tell someone who can actually help. Sarai pulled out the small piece of paper she kept in her apron pocket and wrote quickly, Speaking means death. Sarah read the words and her expression turned grave. Then we'll protect you, Lee and I, however we can. It was the first time in 8 years anyone had offered her protection without conditions, without threats. Sarai's tears spilled over. Sarah pulled her into a gentle hug. You're not alone anymore, dear. You're not alone. But even as Sarai accepted the comfort, she knew the truth. As long as her enemies were out there, as long as she carried the Lambert name, she would never truly be safe. And now, with the mate bond awakening, she had even more to lose. The next week passed in a state of heightened tension. Sarai felt eyes on her constantly. Gundred's cold stare whenever she passed, Marmon's thoughtful gaze when their paths crossed. Even Alpha Wyatt Mills seemed to notice her more, his expression calculating. Something was shifting. The careful balance she'd maintained for 8 years was crumbling. It was late evening when everything changed. Sarai was cleaning the upper corridors when a guard appeared. You, girl, the king requests your presence in his private chambers. Sarai's heart stopped. His private chambers, not the library, not a public space. She shook her head, remembering Gundred's warning. The guard's expression hardened. It wasn't a request, it was an order. Fear and longing warred inside her. But she couldn't refuse a direct command from the Alpha King, not without raising suspicion. She followed the guard through winding corridors to the royal wing. He knocked once on a heavy wooden door, announced her, and left. "Come in," Marmon's voice called. Sarai pushed open the door and stepped into a sitting room decorated in deep blues and silvers. A fire burned in the fireplace. Marmon stood by the window, still dressed in his formal council clothes, but his jacket was off and his sleeves rolled up. He turned when she entered. "Thank you for coming. I know you probably didn't want to." Sarai stood near the door, uncertain. "Please sit," he gestured to a chair near the fire. "I promise I'm not going to hurt you." She perched on the edge of the chair, hands folded tightly in her lap. Marmon poured 2 glasses of wine from a crystal decanter and brought one to her. "Here, you look like you could use it." Sarai accepted the glass with trembling hands. She stared down at the dark red liquid, her mind racing. Why did he summon me? What does he want? Marmon settled into the chair across from her, his own glass in hand. "I've been trying to understand something, trying to figure out why I can't stop thinking about you." Sarai's breath caught. "I see you in my dreams," he continued, his voice low. "I hear you calling to me even though you don't speak. My wolf is restless every moment you're not near." He met her eyes. "Do you know what that means?" She did, of course she did, but she couldn't acknowledge it. "I think you're my mate," Marmon said softly. The words hung in the air between them. Sarai's hand shook so badly that wine sloshed in her glass. She set it down quickly on the side table before she spilled it. "I don't know how I know," Marmon went on, "but I feel it, here." He pressed a hand to his chest. "Like something's been missing my whole life and suddenly I've found it, found you." Tears burned in Sarai's eyes. She wanted to tell him yes, to fall into his arms and accept the bond, but she couldn't. She shook her head desperately. "Why not?" Marmon leaned forward. "Sarai, if you feel this too, why are you fighting it?" She fumbled for the paper in her apron pocket, her hands shaking so hard she could barely write. Finally, she managed 3 words, "You'll be killed." Marmon read the note and confusion crossed his face. "What? Who would kill me?" She wrote again, "My enemies." "Your enemies?" He stood, agitation clear in his movements. "Who are your enemies? Who are you that you have enemies powerful enough to threaten a king?" Sarai stood too, panic rising. She'd said too much, revealed too much. She turned toward the door, but Marmon was faster. He didn't grab her, but he moved to block her path. "Please don't run, not again." His voice was pleading. "Just tell me the truth. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." Sarai shook her head. She tried to step around him, but he caught her hand. Not forcefully, gently. The moment their skin touched, the mate bond flared to life. Sarai gasped, the sensation overwhelming. Heat and recognition and belonging all crashed through her at once. Marmon felt it too. His eyes widened, his grip tightening slightly. "There, you feel it, don't you?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Then stop running from it, from me." He brought her hand to his chest, pressing it over his heart. "Whatever you're afraid of, we'll handle it, but don't shut me out." Sarai wanted to believe him, wanted to think that love could conquer the danger that stalked her. But she'd seen what happened to people who trusted the wrong person. She pulled her hand free and grabbed the wine glass she'd set down. She needed to leave. Needed to. She froze. In the candlelight, she could see a faint oily residue on the rim of the glass. A residue that shouldn't be there. Her heart stopped. Poison. She looked at Marmon's glass. He was raising it to his lips, still watching her with that heartbroken expression. Without thinking, Sarai lunged forward and knocked the glass from his hand. It shattered on the floor, wine spreading across the carpet like blood. "What?" Marmon started. Sarai grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the window, away from the spilled wine. She pointed frantically at the broken glass, then mimed drinking and clutching her throat. Understanding dawned in Marmon's eyes. "Poison." She nodded. He immediately strode to the door and yanked it open. "Guards, get Beta Isaac and the royal physician, now." Within minutes, the room filled with people. Isaac arrived first, his weathered face tight with concern. The physician, an elderly man named Harlan McGraw, examined the wine while guards secured the room. Marmon kept Sarai close to his side, one hand protectively on her shoulder. "There's nightshade in this wine," Harlan confirmed. "Enough to kill within the hour." Gasps rippled through the room. Isaac's expression was murderous. Who had access to the king's chambers? "Only servants and trusted guards," Marmon said. "And me." All eyes turned to Sarai. She felt the accusation in their stares. The mute servant, the one nobody knew, the perfect suspect. "She saved me," Marmon said firmly. "She stopped me from drinking it." "Convenient," a voice said from the doorway. Alpha Wyatt Mills stood there, his arms crossed. "The girl knocks the glass from your hand, claims it's poisoned. How do we know she didn't poison it herself to gain your trust?" "That's absurd," Marmon snapped. "Is it?" Wyatt stepped into the room. "We know nothing about this girl, where she came from, who she really is. For all we know, she's an assassin." Sarai's blood ran cold. Wyatt's eyes held a knowing gleam, like he knew exactly who she was. "She's not an assassin," Isaac said quietly, but there was something in his tone, a warning. "Then what is she?" Wyatt demanded. "Make her speak, make her defend herself." "She can't speak," Marmon said. "Can't or won't?" Wyatt echoed Marmon's earlier question. "I think it's time we found out the truth about our mysterious mute servant." Sarai felt the walls closing in. If they investigated her, they'd discover who she was, and whoever killed her family would finish the job. Unless she ran. She pulled away from Marmon's protective grip and bolted for the door. "Stop her," Wyatt shouted. But Sarai was faster. Years of navigating the palace had taught her every shortcut, every hidden passage. She ran through corridors and down stairs, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind her, she could hear shouting, guards giving chase. She burst into the servants' quarters and grabbed her few belongings. A change of clothes, a small pouch of coins she'd saved, the ribbon her mother had given her. She had to leave, tonight, before they discovered the truth. "Sarai." She spun to find Lee and Sarah standing in the doorway. "What's happening?" Lee asked. "There are guards everywhere." Sarai couldn't explain, couldn't write fast enough to make them understand. "You have to run, don't you?" Sarah said gently. Sarai nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Then go," Lee said. "We'll tell them you went toward the east gate, you go west." "Be safe," Sarah added, pressing something into Sarai's hand, a small knife, for protection. Sarai hugged them both quickly, then fled through the basement passages. She emerged near the western gate, the one used for supply wagons. The guards there didn't know about the chase yet. They let her pass without question, just another servant leaving after her shift. Sarai ran into the night, leaving behind the only home she'd known for 8 years. Leaving behind her mate. But as she disappeared into the forest, she felt the mate bond stretching, pulling, screaming at her to go back. She ignored it and kept running. Sarai made it 3 days. 3 days of sleeping in abandoned barns and stealing food from market stalls. 3 days of the mate bond pulling at her chest like a physical wound. 3 days of wondering if Marmon thought she'd tried to kill him. On the 4th morning, she woke to the smell of smoke. She'd been sleeping in a farmer's empty storage shed on the outskirts of the capital. But when she opened her eyes, flames were already crawling up the walls. Sarai scrambled to her feet, but the door was blocked, barred from the outside. No. She ran to the window, but it was too small to climb through. Smoke filled her lungs, making her cough. This was a trap. Someone had found her. She grabbed a piece of wood and tried to break through the wall, but the old shed was sturdier than it looked. The flames grew higher, hotter. "I'm going to die here." Then she heard voices outside, shouting. "She's in there," a male voice. "The king's mate is in there." More shouting, the sound of wood splintering. The door crashed open. Through the smoke, Sarai saw him. Marmon. He burst into the burning shed, his shirt already singed, his eyes wild. "Sarai." She tried to run to him, but smoke inhalation had stolen her strength. She collapsed. Marmon caught her, lifting her into his arms. I've got you. He carried her out of the shed, just as part of the roof collapsed behind them. Outside, guards were tackling someone to the ground. Sarai's vision was blurry, but she recognized the uniform. A palace guard, one of Wyatt's men. Marmon laid her gently on the ground, kneeling beside her. "Breathe, just breathe." Sarai coughed, her lungs burning, but she was alive. They were both alive. "The fire was set deliberately," Isaac's voice said. He appeared beside Marmon, his face grim. "We caught Rufus Turlow in the act. He confessed, said he was paid to eliminate the girl before she could reveal damaging information." "Paid by whom?" Marmon demanded. "He won't say, but we'll get it out of him." Sarai's vision was clearing now. She looked up at Marmon and saw the fear and relief warring on his face. "Why did you run?" he asked quietly. "After you saved my life, why did you run?" She couldn't answer, could only stare at him with tears streaming down her soot-stained face. "Your Majesty," Isaac said carefully, "we need to get her somewhere safe, and we need to talk about who she really is." Marmon's eyes widened slightly. "You know." "I've always known." Isaac's expression was heavy with guilt. "I should have told you sooner, but I was trying to protect her." "Protect her from what?" Marmon looked between them. "Someone tell me what's going on." Isaac helped Sarai to her feet. She swayed, and Marmon immediately steadied her with a hand on her arm. "Not here," Isaac said. "We need to get back to the palace, somewhere secure." They brought her back through the west gate, avoiding the main entrance. Marmon kept his cloak wrapped around her, hiding her from curious eyes. They took her to a small room in the royal wing, not a servant's quarters, a guest chamber with actual furniture and warmth. A physician examined her and treated her burns. Minor, thankfully. The smoke inhalation was the worst of it. When the physician left, it was just Sarai, Marmon, and Isaac. "Talk," Marmon commanded, "and I want the whole truth." Isaac sighed and pulled up a chair. 8 years ago, I was sent to investigate the Lambert massacre." Marmon's expression sharpened. "The border raid." "It wasn't a raid, it was an assassination." Isaac's voice was heavy. "Alpha Derman Lambert and his entire family were targeted. The attack was systematic, professional." "I remember," Marmon said. "There were 7 survivors." 6, Isaac corrected, "and 1 Lambert." Marmon's gaze snapped to Sarai. "This is Sarai Lambert," Isaac said. "Derman's daughter, the last surviving heir of the Lambert bloodline." Silence filled the room. Marmon stared at Sarai, shock and understanding dawning on his face. "Your nobility." She nodded slowly. "Why didn't you tell me? Why hide for 8 years?" Isaac answered for her. "Because whoever orchestrated the Lambert massacre wanted the entire family dead. If Sarai's identity became known, she'd be killed to finish the job." "Who did it?" Marmon demanded. "I don't know, but someone with resources, someone with influence." Isaac met Marmon's eyes. "Someone possibly within your own council." The implication hung in the air. "You think one of my advisors killed an entire pack to steal their land?" Marmon's voice was dangerous. "The Lambert territories were absorbed by the Mills pack after the massacre," Isaac said carefully. "Alpha Wyatt Mills has grown very powerful in the last 8 years. You're accusing Wyatt." "I'm stating facts and letting you draw conclusions." Marmon turned to Sarai. "Is this true? Is Wyatt the one who killed your family?" Sarai's hands trembled. She reached for paper and pencil and wrote, "I don't know, but Gundred knew who I was. She threatened me, told me to stay silent or I'd die." "Gundred Brock," Marmon's expression darkened. "My head servant." Sarai nodded. "She's been protecting Wyatt's secret," Isaac said, "keeping Sarai controlled through fear." Marmon stood abruptly and began packing. "So the woman I trusted to run my household has been sheltering my mate, knowing she was in danger, and using that danger to keep her silent." The word mate sent a jolt through Sarai's chest. "Yes," Isaac confirmed. "And Wyatt may have killed her entire family to steal their land." "It's likely. And now someone's trying to kill her again, because she's getting too close to me." "That's my assessment." Marmon stopped packing and looked at Sarai, really looked at her. "You've been living in fear for 8 years, watching your mate every day but unable to claim him because it would mean your death." Sarai's tears fell freely now. She nodded. Marmon crossed to her and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see you sooner. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. She shook her head. Not your fault, she mouthed. It is my fault. You've been in my palace under my protection, and I was blind. His grip tightened. But I see you now, and I'm not letting you go, not ever. The mate bond surged between them, no longer buried or denied. It wrapped around them both, golden and unbreakable. Your Majesty, Isaac said gently, we need to move carefully. If Wyatt is involved, confronting him without proof could start a civil war. Then we get proof, Marmon said, not taking his eyes off Sarai. We investigate quietly, and we keep Sarai safe while we do it. There's something else you should know, Isaac added. The fire tonight. Rufus Turlow was one of Wyatt's personal guards. Marmon's jaw clenched. He's getting bold. Or desperate, if Sarai speaks, if she reveals what she knows. I don't know anything, Sarai wrote frantically. I was hiding in a cellar during the attack. I didn't see who did it. But you're a living claim to Lambert land, Isaac said. That makes you dangerous to whoever took it. Marmon stood. Then we use that. We make it clear that Sarai is under my personal protection, that she's my mate, and we see who panics. That could provoke an attack, Isaac warned. Good, let them attack. Let them reveal themselves. Marmon's voice was pure alpha command. I'm done playing political games while my mate lives in fear. Sarai wanted to argue, wanted to tell him it was too dangerous, but exhaustion and smoke inhalation had stolen what little strength she had left. Marmon seemed to notice. She needs rest. We'll continue this tomorrow. Isaac nodded and left. Marmon helped Sarai to the bed. I'm not leaving you alone. I'll sleep in the chair. She shook her head and patted the bed beside her. Are you sure? She nodded. He removed his boots and sword belt and lay down beside her, careful not to crowd her. Sarai turned to face him, their bodies close but not touching. Hi, he said softly. She smiled slightly. Hi, she mouthed. I have a mate, he murmured. After all these years wondering if I'd ever find her, she's been right here. Sarai's eyes filled with tears again. Don't cry, he whispered, reaching up to brush the tears away. You're safe now, I promise. Whatever it takes, whoever I have to fight, you're safe. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that love could protect her from the shadows of her past. But she'd learned long ago that safety was an illusion. Still, lying here beside her mate, feeling the warmth of his presence and the strength of the bond between them, she let herself hope. Just a little. Just enough. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 8 years, fell asleep without fear. Sarai woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and Marmon's arm draped protectively over her waist. For a moment, she forgot everything. The danger, the secrets, the years of hiding. She just felt safe. Then reality crashed back, and she tensed. Marmon stirred beside her, mourning. She turned to face him. His dark hair was mussed from sleep, and there was a softness in his eyes she'd never seen before. How are you feeling? He asked. She touched her throat, still sore from the smoke. We'll have the physician check on you again. He sat up, running a hand through his hair. But first, we need to talk about what happens next. Sarai's stomach nodded. A knock at the door interrupted them. Your Majesty, it's Beta Isaac. Come in, Marmon called. Isaac entered, followed by 2 women, Lee and Sarah. They demanded to see Sarai, Isaac explained. They were quite insistent. Lee and Sarah rushed to the bed, their faces filled with relief. We heard about the fire, Lee said. We were so worried. Sarah took Sarai's hand. Are you all right? Sarai nodded, squeezing Sarah's hand in return. These are your friends, Marmon asked. The only ones who knew something was different about her, Sarah confirmed. We've been trying to protect her as best we could. Thank you, Marmon said sincerely. I'm in your debt. We don't need thanks, Lee replied. We need to know what's going to happen now. Gundred has been asking questions, lots of questions. Isaac's expression darkened. What kind of questions? About where Sarai went, who she talked to, if we knew anything about her past. Lee glanced at Sarai. She's worried about something. With good reason, Isaac muttered. There was another knock. This time a guard entered. Your Majesty, Alpha Wyatt Mills is demanding an audience. He says it's urgent. Marmon and Isaac exchanged looks. Show him to the council chambers, Marmon ordered. We'll be there shortly. The guard left. This is it, Isaac said. He knows something's changed. Marmon stood and began dressing in his formal council clothes. Sarai stays here, with guards at the door. Sarai grabbed his hand and shook her head. You want to come? Marmon asked, surprised. She nodded firmly. It could be dangerous. She wrote quickly, I've been hiding for 8 years. I'm done hiding. Marmon studied her face, then nodded. All right, but you stay beside me, and if things get dangerous, you let me handle it. Lee helped Sarai dress in borrowed noble clothes. A simple but elegant blue dress that made her look nothing like the servant she'd been. When she was ready, Marmon offered her his arm. Together. Together, she mouthed. They walked to the council chambers, Isaac leading the way and guards flanking them. The chamber was a large circular room with a round table at its center. Alpha Wyatt Mills stood beside the table, his expression cold and calculating. He looked at Sarai and something flickered in his eyes, recognition and fear. Your Majesty, Wyatt said, his voice tight. I came as soon as I heard about the attempt on your life. I'm relieved to see you're safe. Are you? Marmon's tone was neutral. Of course, Wyatt's eyes kept darting to Sarai. Who is this? This is Sarai Lambert, Marmon said deliberately. My mate, and the rightful heir to the Lambert territories. The room went absolutely silent. Wyatt's face drained of color. Lambert, but the Lamberts are all dead. Clearly not, Isaac said coldly. This is impossible. The girl is a servant, a mute. Wyatt's voice rose. You're being deceived, Your Majesty. This is some kind of trick. The only trick here is the one you've been playing for 8 years, Marmon replied. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Isaac stepped forward. The Lambert massacre, the convenient absorption of their territories into your pack, the fact that you've grown more powerful than any other alpha in the kingdom. That's because I'm strong. I built my pack through hard work and smart alliances. You built it on the bodies of innocents, Marmon said quietly. Wyatt's hand moved toward his weapon. Instantly, guards drew their swords. I wouldn't, Isaac warned. Wyatt froze. You have no proof. This girl can't even speak. How can she testify to anything? She doesn't need to speak, Marmon said. We have other evidence. He nodded to Isaac, who placed several documents on the table. Correspondence between you and the rogues who attacked the Lambert pack, Isaac explained. Payment records, witness statements from survivors who saw your men among the attackers. Those are forgeries, Wyatt snarled. We also have a confession from your guard, Rufus Turlow, the one who tried to burn Sarai alive yesterday. Marmon's voice was ice. He named you as the one who paid him. Wyatt's eyes went wild. This is a conspiracy. You're trying to destroy me because you're weak, because you want to eliminate anyone stronger than you. I want justice, Marmon corrected. For the innocent people you murdered, for the years Sarai spent in fear, for the poison you put in my wine. I didn't poison your wine. No, but you ordered it done. Isaac placed another document on the table. Gundred Brock has also confessed. In exchange for leniency, she's provided details of your entire conspiracy. Wyatt's face went from pale to red. That woman is a liar. Funny how everyone who works for you is suddenly a liar, Marmon observed. Sarai watched Wyatt's face, and she saw the moment he realized he was trapped. The moment panic overrode caution. He lunged for Marmon. But Marmon was faster. He caught Wyatt's arm and twisted it, forcing the older alpha to his knees. You're under arrest, Marmon said calmly. For conspiracy, murder, attempted murder, and treason. You'll regret this, boy, Wyatt spat. My allies won't stand for this. There will be war. Then let there be war, Marmon replied. I'd rather fight for justice than maintain peace built on lies. Guards dragged Wyatt away, still shouting threats. When the doors closed behind him, Sarai's legs gave out. Marmon caught her, guiding her to a chair. It's over, you're safe. She buried her face in her hands, her whole body shaking. 8 years of fear, 8 years of running, 8 years of silence, all crashing down at once. Marmon knelt beside her, pulling her into his arms. Let it out, you're safe now, let it out. And she did. She sobbed into his shoulder, the grief and trauma finally finding release. Isaac quietly dismissed the guards, giving them privacy. When Sarai's tears finally slowed, Marmon gently tilted her face up. "There's something I need to ask you." She wiped her eyes, waiting. "Will you let me court you, properly, not as king and servant but as mates?" Sarai's breath caught. "I know you've been through hell. I know trust doesn't come easily anymore, but I want to do this right." His gray eyes held hers. "I want to know you, all of you. The girl you were before the massacre, the woman you've become, everything." Sarai reached up and touched his face gently. Then she nodded. Marmon smiled, real and bright. "Yeah." "Yeah," she mouthed. He kissed her forehead. "Then we'll take it slow. We'll heal together. And when you're ready, when you feel safe enough, we'll make it official." She wanted to tell him that she felt safe now, that she was ready. But the words were still locked inside, 8 years of silence not so easily broken. But she would break it, eventually. For now, she had her mate, she had justice, she had her life back. It was enough. More than enough. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of investigations and testimonies. 3 weeks of Wyatt's co-conspirators being arrested. 3 weeks of truth finally coming to light. And 3 weeks of Marmon courting Sarai like she was the most precious thing in his world. He brought her flowers from the palace gardens. He read to her in the library. He taught her to dance in the moonlight when no one was watching. He never pushed her to speak, never demanded more than she could give. And slowly, carefully, Sarai began to heal. Lee and Sarah had been elevated to positions of honor, no longer servants, but companions to the future queen. They helped Sarai navigate the complicated world of court politics, teaching her everything she'd need to know. But there was one thing left to do. One final step. The trial. It was held in the Great Hall, with nobles and common people alike in attendance. Marmon had insisted it be public. No more secrets, no more shadows. Sarai sat beside him at the head of the chamber, dressed in silver and blue, the Lambert family crest displayed proudly on her gown. Wyatt was brought in chains, his usual arrogance gone. He looked smaller somehow, defeated. "Alpha Wyatt Mills," Marmon began, his voice carrying through the hall. "You stand accused of orchestrating the massacre of the Lambert pack, of murdering Alpha Derman Lambert, Luna Kathleen Lambert, and 27 other pack members, of stealing their territories through violence and deception, of attempting to murder Sarai Lambert, the last surviving heir, and of attempting to poison your king. How do you plead?" "Not guilty," Wyatt said, but his voice lacked conviction. The trial lasted 3 hours. Witness after witness came forward. Survivors of the massacre who identified Wyatt's men, guards who testified to his orders, and finally, Gundred Brock herself, who detailed 8 years of conspiracy. When it was over, the evidence was overwhelming. Marmon stood. "The council has heard the testimony. The evidence is clear. Alpha Wyatt Mills, you are found guilty on all charges." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. "The sentence is life imprisonment," Marmon continued. "All territories illegally obtained are hereby returned to their rightful owner. Sarai Lambert is recognized as the legitimate heir to the Lambert pack and lands." More gasps, this time of surprise and approval. Wyatt was dragged away, and the hall slowly emptied. When they were alone, Marmon turned to Sarai. "Are you all right?" She nodded. Then very slowly, very carefully, she opened her mouth. "Thank you." The words were hoarse and broken from 8 years of disuse, but they were words. Marmon's eyes widened. "You spoke." "I spoke," she repeated, her voice getting stronger. Tears streamed down his face as he pulled her into his arms. "You spoke." "I'm done being silent," she whispered against his chest. "I'm done hiding." "What do you want to do now?" he asked. She pulled back to look at him. "I want to rebuild the Lambert lands, the pack, everything that was destroyed. We'll do it together. And I want," she hesitated, then gathered her courage. "I want to be your queen, officially." Marmon's breath caught. "Are you sure? We can wait as long as you need." "I've waited 8 years." She smiled, and it felt strange but wonderful. "I'm ready." "Then let's make it official." The ceremony was held under the full moon, in the palace gardens that had been open to everyone. noble and common alike. Sarai wore silver silk that shimmered like starlight. Her hair flowed loose down her back, a crown of white flowers woven through it. Marmon stood at the altar in formal robes, his eyes never leaving her face as she walked toward him. Beta Isaac performed the ceremony, his voice strong and proud. We gather tonight to witness the joining of two souls, to celebrate the bond between alpha and mate, to acknowledge the queen who will stand beside our king. He turned to Sarai. Sarai Lambert, do you accept the responsibility of leadership? Do you pledge to serve this kingdom with courage and compassion? I do, her voice rang clear across the gardens. And do you accept Marmon Richmond as your mate, your partner, your equal in all things? She looked at the man who had seen her when she was invisible, who had protected her before knowing why, who had chosen her despite every obstacle. I do. Isaac turned to Marmon. And do you, Alpha King, accept Sarai as your mate and queen? I do. Marmon's voice was thick with emotion. I've been waiting my whole life for her. Then by the power of the old laws and the blessing of the moon, I declare you joined. One soul, one purpose, one future. The crowd erupted in cheers. Marmon kissed her as the moon rose full and bright overhead, and Sarai felt the last piece of her fear dissolve. The celebration lasted until dawn. People from every corner of the kingdom came to congratulate them. Lee and Sarah presented Sarai with a gift, her old servant's headscarf, carefully preserved and framed. So you never forget where you came from, Lee explained. Sarai embraced them both. I could never forget. You saved me when I had no one. Later, as the celebration wound down, Marmon and Sarai stood on the palace balcony overlooking the kingdom. Any regrets? He asked softly. Not a single one, she leaned against him, except that it took so long to find my voice again. You found it when you were ready, he kissed her temple. That's what matters. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. What happens now? Sarai asked. Now we build. We heal the divisions in the kingdom. We restore the Lambert lands. We create a place where no one has to hide who they are. His arm tightened around her waist. We make this kingdom worthy of you. Worthy of us, she corrected. Us, I like the sound of that. Sarai turned to face him, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. I love you. I've loved you since the first day I saw you, even when I couldn't say it. I know, he smiled. My wolf knew, I just had to catch up. You're here now, that's all that matters. I'm never leaving, you're stuck with me. Good, she grinned, because I'm never letting you go. They sealed the promise with a kiss, as the sun rose fully, chasing away the last shadows of night. Epilogue. 6 months later, Sarai stood in what had once been the ruins of her childhood home. Now it was rebuilt, stronger than before. The Lambert territory had been restored, and former survivors had returned to help rebuild their pack. A memorial stood in the center of the village, honoring those who had died. Sarai placed flowers at the base, her fingers tracing her parents' names carved in stone. They'd be proud of you. She turned to find Marmon approaching, 2 children running ahead of him, orphans from the massacre who had found new homes in the rebuilt village. I hope so, Sarai said. Marmon put his arm around her shoulders. They'd be amazed by what you've accomplished, the schools, the healing centers, the way you've brought this pack back to life. We brought it back, she corrected. You helped with everything. You did the hard part. You found your voice again. Sarai looked out over the village. Children played in the streets. Adults worked in newly planted fields. Laughter filled the air where there had once been only silence and death. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if things had been different? Marmon asked. Sometimes, but then I remember that everything I went through made me who I am. She turned to face him. Made me strong enough to be your queen, made me wise enough to help others who have been through trauma. Made you perfect, he said softly. Not perfect, just real. He pulled her close. That's better than perfect. They stood together, watching the village they'd built from ashes. Sarai thought about the girl she'd been 8 years ago, broken and voiceless and terrified. And she thought about the woman she'd become, strong and vocal and fearless. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? for seeing me, even when I was invisible." "You were never invisible," Marmon replied. "You were always there, waiting for someone to really look." "You looked." "I couldn't help it. You're impossible to miss." Sarai laughed, the sound free and joyful. She'd survived by staying silent, but she lived, truly lived, by finally being seen. And she would spend every day using her voice to help those who'd forgotten theirs. "Come on," Marmon said, taking her hand. "Let's go home." Home, not a basement corner, not a hiding place, but a palace where she belonged, a kingdom she helped rule, a life she'd built from the ruins of tragedy. As they walked back toward the palace, Sarai spoke one final truth into the gathering twilight. "I'm not afraid anymore." "I know," Marmon squeezed her hand. "You're the bravest person I've ever met." And as the stars began to appear overhead, Sarai Lambert Richmond, Queen of the Northern Kingdom, smiled. She was no longer invisible, no longer silent, no longer afraid. She had found her voice, she had found her mate, she had found herself. And she would never hide again.